Welcome everybody. We'll give a couple extra minutes just to make sure anyone else can join. Thanks for being on time. Today, as you all know, is Adam Shapiro. We're going to go through the 7 building blocks of sales enablement. We would love for this to be an interactive session. So if you have any questions, make sure to raise your hand. We will get to them as we go. Or you can go ahead and chat in your questions as well, and Adam can call upon you or just answer them. And I will pass things off to Adam as people start coming through to give a proper introduction on you and what you do.
Well, thanks, Ashley, and thank you, PeopleLinx, for having me today. We've got an hour together, and obviously the title is the 7 building blocks of sales enablement. We'll go through those today. You'll see within each building block that I lay out for everyone, there's also an associated lab work. We will not do the lab work within this hour, but if you send me a LinkedIn request, I'll send you this presentation as a PDF and you'll see all the labs. If we do have time at the end after questions, we'll survey everyone and see if there is one particular lab you'd like to do right now within this webinar. Like I said, we'll go till 3 o'clock. And of course, I'm open to talk to any of you afterwards. So why don't we get started? You ready, Ashley?
Yep, go ahead.
In my mind, the way to start with sales enablement with any company or with any of my clients is we have to have a foundational definition of sales excellence. We can't start enabling our sales team unless we all agree on what it means to be excellent as a salesperson. I've come up with a definition that includes 3 items. And if you think about it, the intersection of these 3 defines sales excellence. Do we know our process, how we go from first initiation through closing on sales opportunities? Do we know our messaging? And I define messaging as all the work we're doing to prep for a sales conversation or a sales interaction, and all the recapping that goes on after that interaction. And then throughout my 19 years of doing this, I've come up with a set of disciplines where I'm standing on the shoulders of other giants to pull it all together. One thing about the process that you'll see in this presentation, I've genericized it. It's just a blank vanilla process. Yours may be different. Yours is likely different. And also, when I define sales excellence for this presentation, we're mostly limiting ourselves to a B2B, a business-to-business sales environment. Although, of course, there are carryovers from B2B to B2C. Why process? This gentleman you're looking at is Edwards Deming, and he described that if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you really don't know what you're doing. And this really works for me when it comes to sales, because we get so many people who get into a sales opportunity and we're like, okay, what are you doing next? Where are you going with this opportunity? And they just don't know. So we've defined a process, but I like to say we define a process in terms of what our buying public is going through as well. Whenever we buy something, we go through a 3-stage process. Hey, I need something. What are the alternatives? And I commit to something. And I submit that your sales process should also align with the buyer's buying process. I actually had a conversation with a client this morning where they thought they were ready to propose, but yet they hadn't really had a meaningful conversation with one of the key players within the decision-making committee, if you will. Some of the items you'll see on here you may not understand. SQL is a HubSpot term for sales qualified lead. That could just be lead if you want. I use the acronym MI for meaningful interactions that you have with your buying committees. And then the E's are really just for the term evaluation. You'll never hear me say we should always be closing, which is a throwback to Glengarry Glen Ross, if you remember the movie. I'd rather always be moving ahead in our sales process and in alignment with our buying process. But then what do I mean about messaging? Well, we all like a nice plate of wings, but we should be enabling our sales team to never have to wing it. So when we're defining sales excellence, if you're going to wing it, do it right. You'll get this slide summarizing. It says that if you're going to wing it, do it right. And that means getting lines from off in the wing, which is an old dramatic term. So be prepared for your sales calls and your sales processes. Here's one set of sales messaging templates that as sales enablers, you should be enabling at a minimum your sales team. And these include outbound and inbound scripts, founding stories, recap templates, evaluation process scripts. And you can see the rest of them here on your screen. And then what do I mean by sales disciplines? That third part, if you will, of the definition of sales excellence. Borrowing from the Challenger sale, we should be teaching, tailoring, and taking control of our sales cycles. Salespeople should have great active listening skills, use strong language, not weak. And again, there's background through all these disciplines. We're just throwing these out there now to get our minds in the right place when it comes to sales enablement. For every conversation we have, we should be starting with why we're here, or why the prospect should want to talk with us, or our customers should want to talk with us. We should be relying on stories and be asking questions, not making statements. But if we are going to make statements, they should be ascribed to somebody else. And I'm not cursing at you there with this use of the symbols there. It's all about metrics. So if we're going to make statements about ourselves, ascribe it to someone else, or use metrics. A lost art or a forgotten art for salespeople really is just to pause and be quiet and let our prospects talk. And then I like to tamp down on the marketing speak unless things are explained. Okay, so I'm sorry, one last one. We often talk about next steps, and managers of salespeople or executives with salespeople under them will say, so what's the next step? What I found is that there's a discipline around understanding what all the steps are just in your buyer's buying process or in your sales process. So we want to tamp down the next and use all instead. For today's purposes for sales enablement, we're going to focus on these sales disciplines: stories, questions, statements, if it's ascribing to someone else, or a metric, and then all steps, not next steps. And of course, throughout, teach, tailor, and take control. Okay. So here's our building blocks to sales enablement. By no means am I saying that this is an exhaustive list. So this is not everything you need to do in order to enable your sales team, but this is the beginning steps to set the right foundation for your sales team. Ideal client profile, key player illumination, mineral rights questions, metrics to build trust. Natalie and Ashley, I'm assuming you're letting people into the room as they come in. Metrics to build trust, stories to build trust, the evaluation plan, and the implementation plan. By the way, we're going to go into each of these next. If you have a question or a comment, you can hit the raise hand in Zoom. I'll see it, Ashley will see it, Natalie will see it, or you can type it out in chat, and Ashley or Natalie will interrupt me and say, hey, we got a question here, slow down a second, let's get to something else. Thumbs up on proceeding with our 7 building blocks. I'll take the smile, Peter, thank you. Okay, let's move on. We're talking about at the beginning of our sales process. You may have sales reps, or you're starting out in your business, and you're like, where do I get started? Who do I even begin to call? So what that means to me is we haven't worked on our ideal client profile. Ideal client profile for me as a sales enabler is all about who should sales pursue. Of course, the answer to that is key players within the ideal client profile. But how do we begin to even identifying who those ideal client profile companies are? And this is building block 1. If I'm starting out at a new company and I'm like, who should I start to call? I want to be able to get a list together. It may be 50 people, 100 people, 200 people. People, I mean companies. How do I whittle down the universe down to those ideal client profile companies that I can start pursuing? Well, we want to start thinking, okay, should we start with a specific industry? Is there a geography we know we're better at than others? Again, ideal client profile is not exclusively, it's more especially, or who do we want to go after first? Is there a size of companies? Do these people share a commonality on what they're frustrated with, or they have objectives they're trying to get to? Is there other limiting items that we can put on the universe to get down to a list that we can start pursuing? So you want to start with your ideal client profile and figure out, okay, who should sales pursue? Your lab would be, okay, let's figure that out. How do we get it whittled down to a manageable size for our sales reps? Moving on. So we've got our company list. We've whittled down our ideal client profile and started developing a nice client list or a prospect list. Like, all right, within those companies, what are the highly likely key players we're going to be interacting with? Now, we may have a history we can rely on. We had a couple of really good opportunities. Here were the titles of the people that we interacted with. Let's go find them. So we'd want to write down, who are those key players? But when I say who, Peter might have the who in mind. Sorry to pick on you, Peter. Other folks might think of, well, I got little kids and I'm reading about Horton, here's the who. And we have different ideas on who to pursue. So we need to illuminate who these key players are within our ideal client profile. And we want to be able to answer the following Mad Lib, if you will. Typically, this title tells us they're constantly focused on achieving something, improving, increasing, or decreasing something, because they can't seem to, they struggle with some sort of challenge, issue, or frustration. But what they don't realize is, and there's something smart we know. So when we start thinking about the people that we want to pursue within an ideal client profile company, we need to understand what those titles are, what their goals or objectives are, their frustrations or challenges, and then come up with an insight. By the way, that insight is from the challenger sale also. So that's our building block 2. I would not want to allow a salesperson to get on a call with a key player at a certain one of our prospects unless they had an idea of what's the highly likely goals, objectives, frustrations, or challenges these people have every day that we can help solve. And then how can they be smart and position insight for them? So we want to get to where we can create that table. And that table includes a reframing insight that changes their mental model. In PeopleLinx business, people think of how hard it is to do outreach. What they don't realize is there's a tailored, specific process and cadence to go after certain companies. That would be the reframe. You want to get to the point where you can hand this table off to your salespeople. And that's building block number 2. So we've got the companies we want to pursue. We've got our key player illumination. And now we're like, all right, well, what do we say to these people? And that's where we kick off that middle level mineral rights and moving into some other items on trust. There's a book called Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott that I highly recommend. What Scott suggests is that in order to have meaningful conversations, we need to interrogate reality, provoke learning, tackle rough challenges, and that'll enrich and align our relationships. And it's true for sales conversations as well. So when we talk to these key players, we need to figure out, okay, how do we get to what's real? And I really like this metaphor of digging for nuggets of value or of consequence between ourselves and our prospects. And really what we're trying to do is say, okay, what's going on here before we have this conversation that would lead someone to want to talk to me as a salesperson or learn more about my company as a provider of some offering. And that's where the interrogate reality comes in. A simple set of questions to get you started. Well, how do you do it today? Whatever it is. Does this ever happen? Does that ever happen? Are you trying to achieve the following? Have you encountered this sort of issue? You want to come up with these issues. Who else is involved? Who's impacted? To what extent? At what cost? What's the value of fixing? How does it make you or others feel? And then what questions can we ask to really get to metrics, to get to value or items of nuggets of value within our conversations? Now, anyone that's been through an engagement with me has seen this before. And I submit if they're doing a good job, they could take this to any company they go to as a building block, if you will, to start to build out their mineral rights questions, to get into those discovery and needs analysis part of the conversations early with their prospects and with each of their key players. It becomes a foundational element of sales enablement. So as you expect, that next lab would be, okay, let's draft our first set of mineral rights for a specific key player. I'm going to take a pause. Any questions so far? Okay, so what do I mean by these value, if you will, numbers, dollars, percentage, and ease for emotions to build trust? Well, this is building block 4. Covey defines trust as sincerity plus competence. The words that come out of our mouth betray whether we're sincere or not. And as salespeople, it becomes really the coin of the realm, if you will. And then how do we display our competence is really what we're discussing today. And there's two ways to do it. The first one is this building block 4. So we all make claims. I have a client actually that does telephony integration, Clay. It's very similar to your business. And they said to me, 99.7% of our customers would recommend us. I'm like, whoa, we don't have to do much work here because that's fantastic. If they had just said, our customers love us, that would be the claim. But they actually followed through with a metric. Personally, I have a problem sometimes building trust because people hear that I'm a consultant. They look past me and say, oh, you're just looking for a new job or you're unemployed. So instead, I'll say, for the last 19 years, I've been helping small and medium-sized consulting companies and technology companies with their sales enablement. Now it's real. Now I've got a metric that I've tied to my claim. We hear this all the time with customer service, referrals, uptime, cost benefit analysis. Whatever your claim is, back it up with a metric to make it not only believable, but trustworthy. It's a quick one, but I want to say it's very important. If you find yourself or your people bragging too much, it's not bragging if you can do it. And the only way you can provide your conversation mate, the person you're talking to, with confidence that you can actually do it is through your numbers. I shouldn't say the only way, one of two ways. The second is what's called social proof, which are through your stories. What do I mean by that? All right, we're moving on now to building block 5. So there really isn't a left and right side of your brain, but the metaphor really works that we make decisions from different areas of our brain or we back it up with facts. And stories are part of our emotional brain, if you will. Once you feel like you're about to hear a story from me or from anyone else you talk to, really, the guard comes down and you want to take it in. So we know from people like Robert Cialdini, who wrote the book Persuasion, that social proof is one of the best ways to get people to trust you. If you can say that other people do it with you, okay, I'll try it out. This is why all those B2C websites have all those recommendations and reviews and so forth, because you want to feel confident that someone else has done it in order to build trust. Well, how do we do that? So I submit that many people out there have tons of success stories within them. But what happens is marketing gets a hold of these success stories and creates 2, 3, 4, 10-page white papers or marketing slicks to describe the story. And salespeople get those stories or those white papers or those videos even and say, I don't know what to do with this. I've got 30 to 60 seconds in order to position our successes with someone else to get them to realize, yeah, we can do this. We actually walk the walk. So here's a great template for you. If you know your key players, if you know what they were trying to accomplish, if you know the situation they were in before you met and what capabilities they needed from you, and finally the results you got, you can write your own success stories. Better, others within your organization can start gathering these success stories and put them into a template like this. This is an actual success story for one of my clients. They work with a development manager at a large financial institution. That's the red key player. They needed to improve the accuracy of their status reports. That's the goal in green. By the way, all goals or objectives should be couched in improve, increase, or decrease. Improve, increase, or decrease. Specifically, at 16 members, 4 different time zones, 2 continents, reporting status via spreadsheets and emails. He spent 8 hours a day building reports, and by the time he was finished, they were often out of date due to the time lag or inaccurate due to input or transcription errors. That's their current situation. What you should be realizing is, how did I get that data? I got that data way back here with my mineral rights questions. So if you're asking the right mineral rights questions and you get them as a customer, you can start writing your success story. If you have successes, but they just happen to come to you as a bluebird or somehow they bought from you and you have no idea why, go back and ask, hey, what was life like before we met? and get some detail, get some metrics, get some mineral rights or some nuggets, if you will, of value. He needed a centralized system that he could build a project status roll up from all developers immediately without data reentry. That's the capability that my client offered their customers. We provide him with this capability, and as a result, they can build an accurate status report in moments, freeing him to spend those 8 hours each week on other more pertinent project management tasks. Are you in a similar situation? If you were to time yourself saying this story to someone else, it's about 45 to 60 seconds. If you pause at every period and comma, you're inviting the prospect to come into the story with you and start shaking their heads or go, well, that's not my story, or that sounds familiar, or get some assent, get some real alignment going. So this is building block 5, stories to build trust. One of the best tools you can have in your quiver is a success story, building on what you've done with other clients and being able to relate it. Most of my clients come to me and say, oh my God, we've got all this tribal knowledge, but it's only in the heads of our founders. You're right. We need to document these. So we get a project going where we start building a library of these stories around all of your capabilities, all of your key players, all of your sorts of niche industries that you work with. And I've got a template for you to work on your success stories. But what happens if you've got features you're about to roll out or capabilities you're about to roll out, or you're a startup and you don't have any successes, or even like in the nick, you have a meeting coming up in a half hour, you haven't had a chance to talk to marketing or your executives, you've got to come up with a story to describe what one of your capabilities or features or differentiators is all about. We can do that. We're going to call this a plausible emergency. This borrows on a lot of, if you're familiar with agile software development. Agile software development is all about having a story in order to get that story built into a capability. Well, what they don't include a lot of times is act 1 of the story. What was the crappy situation that led to needing this capability or this feature? So really it's, hey, someone is faced with a problem, and what if they could do the following? So if you have a new capability, or if you have a differentiator where you can't really rely on a success story, or you just want to describe it to your audience, use the plausible emergency. And it usually starts off something like this. Imagine this. As soon as I say imagine this, you're like, huh, okay, I'm ready. All right, give it to me. I'm imagining a customer calls into your customer support line. Yeah, that happens every day. They've already emailed you, chatted online, and filled out a web form about an ongoing issue. Yeah, they do that. They're frustrated that your customer service rep doesn't have a way to see all those interactions unless she opens 3 different systems all at once, because they're all in different places. It can take 30 seconds just to pull up customer history. On hold times are too high and queues are getting longer and customer satisfaction numbers are down. Oh, and by the way, your customer service reps, they're all frustrated. Is this plausible? I'm like, yeah, that situation comes up all the time. Well, would it help if your customer service reps had one single pane of glass to immediately pop up, showing all the customer communications history, including all their channels, voice calls, emails, SMS, whatever? Would that help? We do that with our converged business communication capability. Now, some of you, and really most salespeople, are really good at the second and third row on this slide. You can describe what we do as a capability. But what happens is you miss the mark with your prospect because they're not in that spot where they would need it in their heads. You haven't positioned them to say, okay, here's what's going on. This is act 1 of the movie when there's a fire in the house or whatever it is. So that first paragraph becomes vitally important to set the stage for when you would need it. I also will help my clients with their demos if they're software people. And what I find is they start bouncing around to all different capabilities, but they don't position the situation where they would need that capability first. So there's no problem capability. And the problem isn't described in a granular way. You see up here, 3 different systems, 30 seconds, on hold times are too high. It's not granular enough where the audience can't see it or imagine they're in there. So it becomes an important building block to be able to position all your capabilities, your differentiators, your features as both in both success stories or plausible emergencies. And there's your template for that. Notice the question marks. How would you feel? Is that plausible? Would that help? I'm inviting my audience to participate in this story by asking these questions as I'm asking them. Do we have any questions? Since we're a relatively small group. Peter, you look like you're champion of the debate.
I unmuted and everything. So with that example of the plausible emergency, to me, it feels kind of cumbersome because you're giving a lot of what if. And I'm just curious. I mean, that's just my opinion. It's not, it's not yours. So I if you could expand a little bit on why, if you feel this is focused enough to put in front of somebody, and why.
So I don't put it in front of somebody unless I'm saying it.
Yeah.
Okay?
No,
So
absolutely.
when I'm telling this story, I'm pausing an awful lot. Now, there's an ongoing push-pull between salespeople and sales enablement. Some sales reps are like, give me the script. I don't want to think about it. Just give me the words. I'll be the actor. I'll deliver the words. Others are like, don't script me. Just give me the highlights. I'll tell the story in my own way. I can't talk like you can talk, or I don't want to talk like you can talk. And I'm fine with both. So what I'll find, and thank you for bringing this up, with my enablement tools, we're drafting the, if you will, worst case scenario. Maybe worse isn't the way to put it, but we're trying to be exhaustive. Once you learn it, then you can make it your own. But let's learn it first. So you'll notice, even when I was reading through this paragraph, I skipped some words. I didn't say every single word in that first paragraph. The point is, can the person feel it? And is there enough data there that they get it? So when I get drafts of these emergencies, often I'll redline them as too vague. I don't feel it. I'm not in pain. I don't feel uncomfortable. Like, oh, I hate when that happens, because I can't, because it's not enough. It's not in focus enough. So Peter, whatever it takes to get that first paragraph into focus, go for it. You know, with HubSpot, what the situations are where someone is just gritting their teeth and going, I wish I had something better.
Yeah.
So so you want to be able to, or even if it's just an implementation of HubSpot, when it's not going well, what is that moment in time, and can you describe it? So,
and I don't mean to monopolize here at all, but I heard you mention the Challenger sale just when I came in, and I was a little bit late. Did you speak more about that concept, or just?
I did not. I brought it up as that I make sure I always ascribe wherever I get something from to the right point, and their points on teach, tailor, and take control. But it's a good question. The tailor part is all about key player elimination. So you can't begin to differentiate your conversations with different people that are within your key player audience unless you understand them first.
Fair enough.
Now, if you're new to sales enablement, if you're even new to sales, the Challenger Sale book is a tough read. It's a graduate level class versus a foundational class, if you will. Okay. So that's the plausible emergency. Got two more building blocks left, and I think we'll have time to actually answer questions and also do some lab work. The next is the evaluation plan. So what happens, raise your hand if you've ever over-proposed. I'm in that group. Thank you, Clay, for being honest. Thank you, Peter, for being honest. And I see this a lot. Once you make that proposal, the prospect thinks they're done with you. I either say yes or no, I let this sit here, or I don't really understand it, so I pocket veto it, put it in a top drawer virtually, and forget about it. What I find is that sales reps need to be equipped with what the expected evaluation plan, some would call it joint work plan, is where we can work together and understand how we get to Oz. So we'll get our prospects asking for things. They'll say things like, well, can I see it if it's a demo? Well, can you describe for me how we would work together? Okay. Can I have a proposal? All these things are evaluative in nature, if you think about it. They're also proof steps. So in my mind, I want you asking two questions. Let's take a step back for a second and say, I'm excited to give you a demo or to walk you through how an implementation would look like with us or how our clients use us. Just got to ask you, are you evaluating us? Now, it seems like such a silly question. Your prospects will probably answer that way. Well, yeah, of course. Well, great. What are the steps in that evaluation and buying process? When I work with younger sales reps, especially, this is a game changer for them. Instead of always being the poodle, wondering if the next step is to put the poodle skirt on, if the next step is to jump through the hoop, if the next step is to jump through the hoop of fire, now they can understand, okay, what are all the steps in their evaluation or in the buying process, if you will, from our prospects. Let's set up some definitions here. Evaluation process are the steps your prospects team go through to arrive at a buying decision. If you have large prospects, they probably have a buying process as well. That's not what I'm talking about for sales enablement. The buying process is like, how do I get listed as a vendor within their system? I have a client, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. Their buying process took me 90 days. Just getting set up in their ERP, getting to where they would be able to send me checks was a big process itself, but that's separate from their decision on whether to work with me. So we're talking just about the evaluation process. So I want to know, so what's the timing like? What tasks or steps do we need to do together in order for you to make a decision on my capabilities and whether we're going to work together? How are we going to go through that and who will be involved? And I've got a conversation model for this. It sounds like you guys are evaluating our offerings. You can put a little pause there on the end of that because the prospect will go, well, yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Are there any deadlines we should be worried about? If you're someone like I'm assuming Peter and Clay, where there's a date they'd want to be live. So what is that date? Hey, if everything works out, when would you want to be live with us? Great. Okay, working backwards from that date. What are the steps in that evaluation? And along the way, what's the criteria for making a decision? Lastly, who else would be involved in selecting, funding, or implementing Sales Reform School, my company? I want to ask these questions. What's interesting is if you're what I'll call column A, like they like what they're seeing or hearing from you, they'll go through all these answers. They'll give you all these answers. If you're unlikely to ever win this business to begin with, or second or third place right now, just send me a proposal, Adam. We don't need to go through all that. And your bell should be going off in your head. Whoa, this isn't qualified. They're not serious about it. What does this look like? Here's a script for you. Again, Peter, some people like the script. Some people want to make it their own. My point is that as sales enablers, our salespeople need to know what is the largest, most hairy evaluation process a prospect might put us through so they can be prepared to hear from about it and talk through it. Oftentimes I'll refer to a sales process as like an accordion. You may win deals with the accordion closed. When they get delayed or you lose, you start expanding that accordion and you see where the gaps are. One of the gaps is right here, usually. You didn't detail the joint work plan or the evaluation process to understand what it would take for us to win or to get to a decision. I'll even say, so what are the steps that our two organizations are going to take for you to either work with us or we part as friends? Oh, well, that sounds kind of nice. Yeah, okay, here's what we'll probably do. And you see this is an example of these 7 items right here. To the point where we can put in a table. If you have really, really large opportunities, you want to do a Gantt chart or something like that, or basically a table. So for your businesses, it becomes some lab work to design your evaluation process. What would your table look like in the most complex evaluation of your offerings. Any questions on this idea of understanding and preparing your salespeople for their evaluation conversation? Okay. I'm getting a lot of head shaking from Natalie and Ashley, and so I'm liking that. my facilitators. Okay, and then the last one is the implementation plan. Imagine this. I'm going to tell you a story. You're sitting there in an airport bar, or a barbecue, or your kid's swim meet. You don't like it, but someone comes out to you and says, "Hey, so what do you do?" And you share what you do. You position perhaps a success story or a plausible emergency to build trust as how you do it. Well, who do you help? Well, who do you do that for? Well, and you describe your ideal client profile, especially but not exclusively. And then the person that you're talking to says, "Well, how do you do that?" Most salespeople flood this part of the conversation. It's not clear. It's not confidently delivered. The implementation plan, the how we do it, is one of the 3 reasons why we lose deals to no decision or to name competitors. The other 2, by the way, are value and usage. How do they use our capabilities, or how do they derive value out of our capabilities? But if they can't understand the implementation story, they still are unlikely to buy. So how do we do that? Nickelback has a song, Rockstar. So how are you going to do it is the question that comes up. By the way, I put all these little fun images in to try to get you to remember these things later. Oh yeah, Nickelback. How are we going to do it? We got to understand that implementation story. So I'm going to be a little self-serving here. Can you show it with a proven process? Now, I mentioned earlier how I like to take like the genius that's out there in the world and make sure it's applying to my clients. This is from a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. Perhaps you've heard of EOS. It's an entrepreneurial operating system. It's how EOS teaches companies how to run their teams, how to run their executive teams. Clay, it sounds like you've heard of it, or it looks like you've heard of it. You're shaking your head.
Yes, that's actually what we've been using. We're still using it to a certain extent, not fully within. We've kind of mapped our own version of it in our environment, but we've been using that for probably 3-4 years now at this point.
That's great. A couple of years ago, I presented at the EOS Worldwide Conference. I presented what sales should know about the EOS. So hand in glove. One of the things that they prescribe, you may remember this, Clay, is you've got to know your proven process. And then everyone in your company should be able to describe your proven process for how you deliver what you do for your customers. You should be able to put it in a graphic, which I've done here. I think it's like page 67 or something like that. I've had this talk before. Can you describe your proven process? Well, here's how I deliver for my clients. For me, it's a 3-phased approach: creation, onboarding, and mastery. You can see what we go through here. So I submit that every time you go into a sales conversation, or your salespeople go into a sales conversation, they should be prepared to confidently deliver your proven process for how your company delivers your capabilities to your clients. If you can't do that clearly and succinctly, you're leaving your prospect wondering, is this someone I want to work with? Are they successful? Should I trust them with my company, with what we do? I have prospects, clients who, before we started working together, would say, "Oh, we don't need to worry about discussing our implementation plan until after the sales closed. I don't want to muddy the water with that." And it's like, whoa. So how do you set up for success? I'm like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, one of those evaluation plan items should be success metrics conversations. And if you're not describing your implementation, you're leaving it out there that they're not really confident in what you're doing. Or your competitors will do that, or vice versa. If you don't do it and your competitors do say, "And here's how we're going to deliver for you," now you're a leg down. So it becomes a critical building block, if you will, to document and then roll out your proven process to your team. Okay. So these are our 7 building blocks of sales enablement. We've gone through ideal client profile, key player illumination, mineral rights questions, metrics to build trust, stories to build trust, the evaluation plan that your prospects go through in order to evaluate whether they should start working with you or not. And then do we know the implementation plan, and can we describe it in a confident and succinct way? Hopefully you see how those 7 building blocks will set you on a path to sales excellence and sales professionalism, really, and in the middle. All right, we've got about 15 minutes left, maybe even a little bit longer. Let me first open up to any questions, or if you want, I went fairly quickly through those 7 building blocks. If you want me to go back to any of them, we can do that as well.
All right, yeah, I'll bite. What trends are you seeing right now in this sort of uncertain economic crash fire? What changes are you seeing about the efficiency of doing exactly that way? Are there things that you'd recommend shifting right now because there are more people involved in the deal, there are more stakeholders, there's more approval? Yeah. Or are you saying, like,
I want to know who your
these
clients
basic,
are. Yeah, I want to know who your clients are first in order to answer that. But generally speaking, when you do a better job at discovery and needs analysis with an eye towards value.
Yeah, totally.
If you would all sniff that budgets are tight, or that you're competing for budget dollars with not only competitors, but totally different projects, the only way to elevate yours in the eyes of decision makers is by having a solid cost benefit analysis. The only way to even get a cost benefit analysis is early gathering information to know what the value is of fixing, or the values of achieving what you're working on. How else are they going to do it? Okay, so really tightening up your early stages conversations around mineral rights questions, more important than ever. In easier times, you'll get, look, we just know we want to get your stuff in here to get started. We don't need a cost benefit analysis. Okay, great. I would assume they do it today.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I'm also seeing, okay, while there have been a lot of salespeople laid off, it doesn't mean that folks are hiring a lot of experienced professional salespeople. So we're thrusting people into sales jobs who are not, we'll call it skilled or experienced in professional selling, especially B2B. So the preparation becomes even more important. You also are having people get involved in sales conversations who don't conceive of themselves as salespeople, and they do things that allow for longer sales cycles, or longer no decisions, or ghosting, or things like that.
Understood.
Yeah. So I'm going to tie that back.
Cool.
Well, Clay and Peter, are there any of these building blocks that you want? Let's go real deep, much deeper on them.
For me, it's probably stories and metrics to build trust. I mean, for us, and you kind of went through it, and one of the notes that I made was, with new service packages and things that we've created, because we're changing the way that we present our services and sell our services. I mean, to me, it kind of seemed like what you were saying is that we need to focus more on the why we created that package, in order to, kind of, just be candid about it with them and say, this is why we created it. Here's the issue that we saw, which is something along the lines of our clients weren't happy with our support because we're supporting a lot of different environments with a lot of different equipment that we're not familiar with. Our solution to that is we replace your equipment, and then we know everything that's involved in your environment, and that way it's easier for us to support. Is that kind of the basis of what you were saying in that one?
So what I'd like you to do, Clay, is go back to your questions first. So turn each of those statements about what we've seen and why we're doing things into questions for them. Are you seeing this? How do you handle that? To where their answers, well, it's like leading them right into the story. Wow, that's fascinating that you're experiencing that. Or, yeah, we expected you were experiencing that. Let me tell you about a client of ours. Or, here's why we came up with this new offering. Just like you said, imagine. And then you go right to here. So you want to gather up the data points to see that their minds are at the same point as we are. Like asking questions around issues and challenges and what they're trying to accomplish. Well, how often does that occur? What is it? How does it feel like? All those things. Well, it's interesting. We felt like we were imagining the following, come up with a customer scenario. That's why we came up with this new way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, Peter brought up the Challenger sale. Their choreography, which I also teach, I'm not affiliated with them, but I think it's a great choreography. In a persuasive conversation, I'm going backwards, sorry. In a persuasive conversation, you want to flesh out the details first, and then they call that rational drowning, and then hit them with the emotional impact story to save them. So this is that current situation. They start describing it for you. Yeah, this sucks and that sucks, and this we can't do this, or we hope to do that, or we have a dream of doing this, but we can't do it because of that. So you get all those data points out. That's the rational side of it. And it's like, all right, we got you. Imagine this. And then you tell them a story and they're like, oh, I'm so relieved. So the story emotionally rescues them from the data that they're drowning in. The data points meaning the actual reality. So their reality is tough or goal driven without any way of getting there. So we can get them there through our stories.
One of the fascinating things I took away from Challenger Sale, and I actually just recently read it, was that, basically this concept of like, you can go in there and ask all the right questions, but if their answers that the person you're trying to sell to already knows, it's like, okay, you're being clever, you're asking the right questions, but how does that excite me? And basically sort of going a step beyond and coming into it with a lot of the data that you need, and then also challenge them to maybe rethink how they're doing sales or rethink how they're doing marketing.
So I got my start 20 years ago in sales management and sales process, if you will, by studying customer-centric selling by Michael Bosworth. And actually just related this story this morning. What Bosworth also teaches, in addition to what you just said, Peter, is that I know I am unlikely to close or close on the right schedule or win a deal. I may even lose to no decision Inc. if I can't understand the value story of what I offer, the usage story, the plausible emergency around my offerings, and then the implementation, which is what I'm talking about here. Mr. or Ms. Prospect, I can't begin to build that value story for you or help you build your value story unless I know your current situation. That's why I'm asking these questions. Sure. So I 100% recommend always being transparent on the why you're asking certain questions, why you're about to tell a story, why you're relating a plan or something like that. And I think salespeople forget that. And it reinforces a negative stereotype about us. Well, why are they asking that question? The buyer always feels like they're have to avoid a gotcha situation. So, hey, here's why I'm asking this. I know you won't buy or you won't take it to your decision maker unless you have a good, tight value story. So if you're willing to, let's go through and figure that out. If you're not, I know my likelihood of winning or you becoming a customer of ours is unlikely.
Wasting your time.
We're both wasting our time, yeah. Right? So Clay, they're so interrelated. Questions to build knowledge base, story to save them when they realize, all right, yeah, I'm glad you did this. So when you have a capability or a differentiator, position it in one of those two stories. By the way, if you've got a capability that you've come up with, it's because, you know, we figured out that 25 out of 28 of our customers were suffering from something. Well, that's important. It shows you actually studied it. If you just say, yeah, we figured out that our customers don't like this. Okay, maybe you're smart, but if you say we studied and 25 out of 28 of our customers were encountering the following, now we know what's going on. Now we trust what's going on. Okay, guys, anything else? Ashley, do you have any questions?
No, this was great for me too, though. Even though I'm not on the sales side, but like a lot of like little things that I can take into my marketing world that were also helpful for me. But I'm gonna drop Adam's LinkedIn in the chat. So if you guys want a copy of these slides, let him know. He can send it, and we'll send you the full recording also.
One other thing, I give 30 minutes to anybody. I actually started this right at the beginning of the pandemic. Really fascinating. I put out into the world that anyone want to talk sales, just grab 30 minutes on my Calendly. And I've talked to people from Southeast Asia, Saudi Arabia, England, of course, all over the United States. Some of them became clients, some of them just contacts. So if you want to talk sales, grab my Calendly. It's on my LinkedIn as well. You can grab 30 minutes. I don't charge for it. That first half hour is free. And then again, if you want the PDF of this presentation, send me a LinkedIn request as well. I'm Adam Shapiro, the sales enablement guy. There is an Adam Shapiro who's a CFO for hire. That's not me. You wouldn't want me doing that.
I've known a number of Adam Shapiros, as a matter of fact.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
All righty. Anything else? Clay, was there another question?
No, I was just going to say nothing else. Nothing else from me. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I hope this was valuable. A good way for you to spend an hour. The recording will be shared. Again, send me a LinkedIn request. I'll send you the PDF of the presentation, and grab a half hour if you ever want to talk sales.
Thank you, Adam.
All right. Thanks, Adam. Nice to meet you, Peter.
Thanks, Adam.
Good to meet you
Bye.
too, Clay.